Becky stood alone by the deserted highway, clutching a cardboard sign with Heinz scribbled on it. She had used a piece of charcoal left over from her campfire the night before to write the name. On this quiet stretch, only a handful of vehicles passed by, mostly big semi-trucks that didn't stop. The surrounding area was so silent it felt like she was in the middle of nowhere. Her heart raced a bit when a family van decelerated and pulled over next to her. A friendly-looking lady rolled down her window, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you headed to Heinz?" she inquired. Becky simply nodded in response. The lady gestured towards the back of her packed van where several children were napping. "I've just come from a field trip with these kids. I wish I could help, but there's hardly any space left," she said apologetically. "Would you like some water or a snack?" Becky, feeling grateful for any kindness, gave a slight shrug, signaling her acceptance. Moving to the back of the van, the lady retrieved 2 water bottles, a sandwich sealed in a Ziploc bag, and a banana from a cooler. Becky, touched by the woman's generosity, simply thanked her. The lady wished her well, hoping someone else might stop and give Becky a ride before driving away. Becky leaned her cardboard sign against her backpack and decided to take a break. She found a spot by the side of the sun-baked road and sat down, facing away from the traffic. Unwrapping the tuna sandwich she'd been given, she took a bite and washed it down with the refreshing water. The heat of the day made the cool liquid feel like a luxury. In the midst of her meal, she caught a shimmering image on the horizon. It was a vehicle, its outline distorted by the heat waves rising from the asphalt. As it came closer, hope bubbled up in Becky. She quickly stood, trying to make herself visible. As the vehicle neared, she recognized it as an old Ford pickup truck. Its pace slowed as it approached her, and she felt a surge of optimism. The truck pulled up beside her, not even bothering to move to the shoulder of the road. Driving it was an older man, his face shaded by a worn cowboy hat. His appearance might have seemed intimidating, but that impression changed the moment he spoke. "You looking for a ride, young lady? Hop in, but only if you've got a funny story to share," he said with a chuckle, reaching over to open the passenger door from the inside. Grateful for his warm demeanor, Becky beamed back at him, hoisting her backpack into the truck. With the weight of solitude and uncertainty lifted, her journey suddenly felt a little lighter and less daunting. Tom McCarthy, a friendly older man with a love for fishing, introduced himself to Becky. He'd spent his morning fishing at one of the numerous ponds dotting the outskirts of the town. As they chatted, Becky shared her destination with him. "I'm heading to the Spencer's old house." Tom raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "The Spencer's place? Haven't seen anyone there in a long while. I actually live just across the street from it. You sure that's where you're headed?" As they entered town, the wide streets greeted them, lined with majestic pine trees casting dappled shadows on the road. The scenic beauty was slightly marred by jarring screech of Tom's truck brakes. He shot a sheepish grin at Becky, acknowledging the noise. "Welcome to Heinz," Tom declared, pointing to the right where a slightly run-down house stood. "That's the Spencer's place." "Thank you, Mr. McCarthy," Becky replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "I suppose I'll be seeing more of you since you're my neighbor." Tom chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure of that. Take care and adios." Becky stared at the aged house in front of her. It might not have been grand, but it was hers now, and she felt a sense of gratitude for that. The untamed grass and weeds, which had once been a lawn, took her back to her parents' house where she had recently cleared similar growth. Memories of her parents surged forward, causing a tightness in her chest. Truthfully, Becky didn't need to settle in Heinz or any specific place for that matter. The open road could have been her refuge, but after the devastating loss of both her parents, the world seemed void of meaning. It was Aunt Leslie, her mother's half-sister, who had gently persuaded her to come to Heinz and live in the family's old home. Not wanting to let down her aunt, who clearly had her best interests at heart, Becky had acquiesced. Deep down, Becky knew she needed some stability and respite from her wandering thoughts on the road. She really, really did. Becky had grown up in a home where alcohol was a daily presence. From her earliest memories, she recalled her parents indulging every single day. On weekdays, they began drinking after work. On weekends, they started in the early afternoon. Her mother, Morgan, consumed almost an entire bottle of wine daily, while her father, Curtis, would guzzle down around 6 beers. By evening, he'd often be visibly inebriated. In an attempt to conceal her habit, Morgan stashed many bottles of wine and glasses in various hiding spots throughout their home. During Becky's high school years, her parents' drinking habits only intensified. Whenever her friends came over, her intoxicated parents would embarrass her, often engaging in loud arguments in front of her friends. As a concerned daughter, Becky had tried addressing the issue when she was younger. However, her efforts were met with denial and defensiveness. Morgan, convinced she was a good mother and justified in her actions due to her stressful job, felt her relaxation methods were no one's concern but her own. Curtis, instead of supporting Becky's concerns, seemed to be enabling Morgan's habits, regularly purchasing wine and cigarettes for her. Each time Becky tried to express her worries about their excessive drinking, her concerns were brushed off with anger. Her parents insisted they didn't have a problem, arguing that they weren't like the inebriated folks seen on the streets. They turned the table on Becky, accusing her of being judgmental and unappreciative of their efforts as parents. While Becky couldn't deny their love and care for her, she was deeply troubled by their constant denial. The daily ordeal became too much for her. Seeing her parents drunk every evening made Becky increasingly reluctant to be around them. Throughout Becky's teenage years, the tumultuous relationship between her parents often resulted in loud arguments. By the time she reached her sophomore year of high school, things had escalated to the point where her parents briefly separated. Noticing that they refrained from drinking when apart, Becky took the initiative and persuaded them to enter rehab. Their stint in rehab seemed to work wonders. After several months of sobriety, they reunited and assured Becky they were on a healthier path. They asked her to trust that they'd turn over a new leaf. Upon graduating from high school, Becky headed to college, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The initial months were blissful. She thrived academically and relished in the news that her parents remained sober. For the next 6 months, everything appeared to be on track. She frequently called home, chatting with her parents, and their conversations were always uplifting. However, during her first spring break at college, Becky's world was shattered. As she was preparing for her break, the college's office called her in for a grave conversation. They informed her that a fire had engulfed her family home. She immediately inquired about her parents, but the office had limited information and advised her to return home immediately. The drive back to her hometown was agonizing. Deep down, she feared the worst about her parents, but a small part of her clung to the hope that perhaps they had survived, albeit with injuries. Upon her arrival, the devastating truth was revealed. After she'd left for college, her parents had secretly resumed drinking. They concealed their relapse during their phone conversations with Becky. Heartbreakingly, on the fateful day of the fire, they had both been intoxicated and had carelessly fallen asleep with lit cigarettes, leading to the tragic incident. Standing at the entrance of Leslie's old home, Becky took a deep breath and pushed open the front door. She was immediately greeted by a wave of dust, prompting a sneeze. Though the house showed clear signs of long neglect, she was grateful to find some old furniture still intact. Placing her backpack on a chair, she took a moment to center herself, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly. Opening her eyes with determination, she rolled up her sleeves, preparing herself for the massive cleanup ahead. But just as she was starting to make some progress, an unexpected knock at the door jolted her. "Who is it?" Becky called out, her voice tinged with caution. Opening the door, she was met by a kind-faced woman in her mid-40s, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I couldn't help but notice someone moving around in here," the woman said with a warm smile. "I never thought I'd see someone in this old place again." Feeling slightly defensive, Becky explained, "It's my Aunt Leslie's house. She sent me here." The woman's face softened in sympathy. "Oh dear, this place has seen better days. I'm Maggie, by the way. Margaret, technically, but everyone just calls me Maggie." Stepping in to glance around, Maggie shook her head at the disarray. "You're planning to stay here? It's quite the fixer-upper." Becky, feeling a mix of embarrassment and determination, responded, "It's what I've got. I'll do my best to make it work." Maggie, with a gleam in her eyes, said, "How about some help? My family and I can pitch in. It'll be faster and more fun with more hands." Surprised by the generous offer, Becky began to decline, mentioning her limited finances, but before she could finish, Maggie cut her off with a reassuring smile. Becky blinked in surprise as Maggie held up a hand, interrupting her. "Hold on there. Understand this. Our town is like one tight-knit family. Forget about money. Here, when someone wants to help, they just do. If they mean business, they'll let you know straight up. Clear?" Becky nodded, a bit overwhelmed by the genuine kindness. "Got it. And thank you. I'm Becky." Maggie beamed. "Lovely name, Becky. Just give me a moment. I'll be right back." Before Becky could even catch her breath, the door burst open again. Maggie returned, flanked by a tall man and a young girl. "This is my husband, Tom. He's great with tools and will help around. And this ray of sunshine is Anna, our daughter. And Tom, Anna, this is Becky." Becky chuckled, recalling her ride into town. "Actually, Mr. McCarthy already gave me a lift here." Maggie looked between them, feigning indignation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tom winked at Becky. "If I had, it would have stolen the surprise of your new friend announcement." Everyone burst into laughter, the atmosphere light and familial. The dynamic between Maggie and Tom was heartwarming. Their affection for each other was palpable. As the day waned, the newly formed team had made significant progress. The house, though still needing work, was on its way to becoming a home. As they sat down to a meal Anna had prepared, Maggie remarked, looking around appreciatively, "We've got more to do, but it already feels warmer, more like a home." Becky smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt. The transformation of the house was incredible, with Anna's delicate doilies and towels adding a touch of homeliness. The space had turned welcoming. As they all settled around the dinner table, Maggie regaled Becky with stories of the town and its vibrant community. She mentioned the plentiful berries and mushrooms they could forage in the nearby woods, painting a picture of a town abundant in nature's gifts. Tom, mostly a man of few words, occasionally interjected with a hum of agreement or added a tidbit to the tale. At one point, Maggie said playfully, "You just wait, Becky. Soon enough, we'll find you a job, and who knows, maybe even a husband." Becky laughed heartily, responding, "Why would I need a husband? I'm perfectly content on my own." Maggie's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Well, most people eventually find someone they want to share life with, start a family, and grow old together." Brushing away the thought, Becky replied, "In my experience, relationships aren't always like that. Sometimes people forget about the ones they love." Maggie leaned in, her expression softening. "Becky, I don't know the full extent of your past, but this town has a way of showing people the brighter side of life and relationships. Just give it some time." In the ensuing days, Becky began to integrate into the community. She quickly realized that she could relax around these straightforward folks. Their directness, though occasionally a tad too frank, meant she never had to second-guess their intentions. Before she knew it, Becky found a role working at the local kindergarten as a nanny. The pay wasn't lavish, but it was enough, and with the genuine kindness she often received, like meals from neighbors or hand-me-downs, she found herself saving more than she spent. The townspeople were genuinely kind-hearted. Just the previous day, as Becky was heading home from work, old Mr. Olson waved her over with a warm smile. "Finished with work for the day, Becky?" he inquired. "Yes, Mr. Olson," she replied, wondering what he wanted. "Why not drop by our house for a moment? We have a little something for you," he offered. Though a bit tired, Becky decided to see what Mr. Olson had in mind. As she approached the entrance of their home, Mrs. Olson was already there, greeting her with a bright smile. By her side were 2 large buckets overflowing with fresh vegetables. "Our garden's been generous this year," Mrs. Olson exclaimed. "Just look at these tomatoes and cucumbers. If you can't finish them all, you can jar them up. There's nothing like the taste of homemade pickles during the chilly months, you know." Staring at the bountiful produce, Becky was momentarily overwhelmed, unsure if she could handle so much. Sensing her hesitation, Mrs. Olson reassured her. "No need to fret, dear. Wayne," she gestured to her grandson, "will help carry them to your place." In her short time in town, Becky had experienced and learned so much. Maggie and Anna had taught her how to nurture her garden, which, with the aid of Tom's tractor, had been cultivated and was now thriving. Becky had mastered the basics of gardening, from watering to weeding, and was proudly harvesting her own crops. She even got used to Maggie's enthusiastic rooster, which seemed to take particular joy in heralding the dawn right beneath her window. With a free day ahead of her, Becky resolved to spend her evening canning the gifted vegetables, thinking ahead to the comforting meals they would provide in the colder months. In the sea of familiar faces and houses in her neighborhood, one stood out as an enigma. Right beside her own home was the residence of an old lady she had yet to formally meet, Mrs. Thompson. Becky had occasionally spotted her moving about her property. Once their eyes had met, and Becky remembered the penetrating gaze Mrs. Thompson had given her. She had a feeling their paths would cross sooner rather than later. Becky cherished routine. Her daily walks to and from work followed the same path, a predictable rhythm that she found comforting. However, one evening, as the sun cast a warm golden glow over the town, a slight deviation from her regular route led to an unforeseen encounter. Near Mr. Jones' convenience store, by a green garbage can, was a frail, mud-covered dog. It looked famished, its bony frame evident through its mottled fur as it desperately tried to find morsels in a discarded pizza box. Seeing the dog tugged at Becky's heartstrings. She had always been fond of dogs, knowing too well the pure love they provided. With caution, she approached the seemingly abandoned animal, gently reaching out her hand for it to sniff. After a brief moment of hesitation, the dog's tail began to wag, accepting her gesture of kindness. Compelled by the dog's vulnerability, Becky decided to take it in. Using her scarf as an impromptu leash, they began their journey back to her house. Once home, the dog's first treat was a warm, cleansing bath. Becky laughed as she watched the water turn from clear to a muddy brown, revealing a shiny golden coat underneath. Reflecting on their chance meeting and the new beginning she was offering the dog, she decided to name him Chance. Following his adoption, Becky's life was punctuated with frequent visits to the vet, shopping sprees for dog toys, and exploring the variety of food Chance might like. She quickly discovered his undying love for tennis balls. Their playtimes in the backyard consisted mainly of endless rounds of fetch, which Chance seemed to never tire of. Their bond, fostered through trust and shared experiences, grew deeper each day. Now, Becky's routine had a new addition. Her mornings began with refreshing jogs in the park, Chance energetically chasing after anything that moved. Evenings were reserved for snuggles on the couch and teaching Chance new tricks. But like all beings, Chance had quirks. His primary one was his persistent barking. Whenever Becky was away, Chance ensured the whole neighborhood knew he was missing her. One particularly sunny day, while playing in the yard, Chance's attention shifted from a mid-air tennis ball to a sneaky raccoon attempting to raid their garbage bin. He barked thunderously, defending his territory from the intruder. Suddenly, the door of the house next door flung open. Mrs. Evelyn Thompson stepped out, irritation evident on her face. "Can't you keep that dog quiet?" she exclaimed, pointing accusingly at Chance. Taken aback, Becky tried to soothe Chance. "I apologize, Mrs. Thompson. He was just startled by the raccoon." Mrs. Thompson, clearly not appeased, was about to head back inside when a softer, kinder voice called out from her home. "Wait, Mom." A younger man emerged from Mrs. Thompson's house, signaling for calm with his raised hands. "Sorry about that," he said, introducing him to Becky with a friendly smile. "I'm Jason. My mom has always been a bit wary of dogs, especially loud ones." Becky, surprised and appreciative of his intervention, nodded understandingly. "I get it, Jason. Chance is still getting used to his new home, and I'm working on his training. I apologize for any inconvenience." With a reassuring smile, Jason retreated into his house. Through the slightly ajar door, the faint sounds of a heated discussion could be heard. Mrs. Thompson's voice, laced with agitation, made Becky wonder if it was really just Chance's barking that had upset her or if there was more to the story. Sitting on her porch, deep in thought, Becky felt torn. She adored Chance, and the idea of letting him go was unbearable. However, she also recognized her responsibility to ensure the peace and well-being of her neighbors. Would finding a new home for Chance be the best decision? Lost in thought, she didn't notice Maggie's approach until her friend commented on her worried expression. Becky confided in Maggie about the incident with Mrs. Thompson, but to her surprise, Maggie only chuckled. With a knowing smile, Maggie shared some history about Mrs. Thompson that helped Becky understand that Chance might not be the primary issue after all. Maggie and Evelyn shared the same father, John McKenna. The sisters had grown up under the same roof, with John and Maggie's mother, Helen. John had always hoped his daughters would be close. To ensure their bond, he even bought houses for them across the street from each other. But tragedy struck when John passed away at 65. The animosity between his first wife, Mary, and his second, Helen, was palpable. This bitterness seeped into the relationship between the sisters. Disagreements between Maggie and Evelyn were frequent, despite both having their own families. One fateful day, a particularly heated argument ended with Evelyn wishing Maggie were dead. That hurtful comment created a rift that lasted over 15 years. Maggie confided in Becky that she had always been open to reconciling, but Evelyn's pride stood as a tall barrier. Becky surmised that perhaps Evelyn's anger toward Chance was more about Maggie. Seeing Maggie's family extend warmth to Becky might have made Evelyn envious. That evening, Anna swung by with a basket brimming with fresh mushrooms. Becky was taken aback. "Is it mushroom season already?" Anna grinned cheekily. "Absolutely. There's a dense forest right behind your backyard. If you go in, though make sure not to wander too deep, it's vast and easy to get lost." Feeling adventurous the next morning, Becky grabbed an old basket from the attic and headed to the forest, with Chance eagerly tagging along. As they roamed amidst the trees, Becky's thoughts drifted back to the sisters. Being an only child, the concept of such deep-seated animosity between siblings was foreign to her. She couldn't fathom how two sisters, even half-sisters, could harbor such resentment. Becky had never been on a mushroom-picking adventure, but she had read enough to know the basics. Immersed in nature's serenity, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The forest was mesmerizing, with early morning mists weaving through the trees, while the sun painted golden hues on the horizon. Every step in this new environment filled her with gratitude towards Aunt Leslie for sending her to such a picturesque town. Even though her night had been interrupted by the constant sounds of vehicles passing through town, her decision to start the day early was proving worth it. She found her first mushroom near the forest's edge and instantly felt the allure of the activity. By the end of 2 hours, her basket was laden with plump white mushrooms. Chance, ever the playful pup, darted around, chasing insects and frequently startling Becky with his sudden barks. Every so often, he would dash off, only to reappear from an unexpected direction. Suddenly, his barking grew more distant and urgent. Following the sound of Chance's bark, Becky was led to a concealed bog adorned with shriveled cranberries from the previous year. Marking her spot by placing her mushroom basket under a distinct oak tree and covering it with leaves, she advanced towards the noise. As the day started to fade, with the sun nearing the horizon, a shocking sight caught her attention. Half hidden amidst the dense foliage was the wreckage of an old airplane. It seemed to be from the World War II era. Becky pondered how an aircraft could end up deep within a forest, but since she hadn't strayed too far from the edge, she assumed the townsfolk were aware of its presence. Her immediate concern was Chance, whose barking echoed from inside the plane, interspersed with whimpers. Worry gnawed at her stomach as she approached the wreckage. Navigating her way around the aged airplane, Becky gently ran her fingers over its corroded wings, wondering why no one had ever removed it from this spot. She placed her foot on a nearby rock to get a better look inside. Suddenly, a sneeze from the darkened interior startled her, causing her to lose her footing and fall to the soft forest floor below. "Who's there?" she shouted, her heart thumping in her chest. The only response was Chance's persistent whining and a thick silence. Despite the unnerving silence, the sneeze had sounded more like that of a child or a small animal. Gathering her courage, Becky picked herself up and clambered back onto the stone to peer into the plane. She inhaled sharply at what she saw next. A young girl with puffy, red eyes, probably no older than 6, sat inside, looking scared and disheveled. "Hey there," Becky cooed gently, reaching in to help the child out. "Who are you? And how did you end up in there?" The little girl sniffed, her voice shaky from fear and cold. "I was curious about the airplane. I wanted to see inside, but then I got stuck." Tears welled in Becky's eyes, thinking of the girl's plight. "Did you spend the entire night in here?" she asked gently. The girl nodded, her lower lip quivering. I tried to leave, but I couldn't. I was so scared when it got dark." Becky hugged the girl close, trying to comfort her. "Let's get you home," she murmured. "We'll get you some food and find your parents." The girl looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Can you please tell my dad I didn't mean to get lost?" Becky smiled reassuringly. "Of course. But remember, it's always important to let someone know where you're going, okay?" She internally decided that the child parents needed a stern reminder about keeping an eye on their kids. Being a parent meant ensuring the safety and well-being of your child, not just providing for them. Holding Kelsey's hand, Becky briskly made her way back to town. The girl seemed eager to talk, perhaps to shake off her fright. Kelsey explained that she lived in the city with her dad. After seeing pictures of the lake and its graceful swans, she had begged her dad to take her there and then to the nearby forest to listen for cuckoos. But he'd been too engrossed in his work and asked her to wait. Unable to contain her excitement, Kelsey had ventured out on her own. As Kelsey narrated her little adventure, they reached Becky's house. The exhausting day took its toll, and after only a few spoonfuls of soup, Kelsey succumbed to sleep on the cozy couch. Becky draped a warm blanket over the child, taking a moment to think about the best course of action. She quickly realized that Kelsey's disappearance must have alarmed her father and probably the whole town. With Kelsey safe for the moment, Becky decided to turn to Maggie, who always seemed to be in the know. Upon hearing about Kelsey, Maggie's eyes widened in shock. "The poor child, the whole town's in an uproar looking for her. Her father's frantic." Taking quick action, Maggie picked up her phone. "I'll notify the police. They've been searching for her." Within minutes, police cars pulled up outside Becky's house, their lights flashing. Becky, worried about waking Kelsey and adding to her distress, rushed out, urging them to approach quietly. Gently explaining the situation, she recounted how she found Kelsey in the abandoned plane. The officers took down her statement, noting every detail. As the story unfolded, one officer got on the radio to call Kelsey's father. Within moments, a pickup truck screeched to a halt in front of Becky's house. Evelyn, the neighbor Becky had yet to really get to know, emerged from the passenger side. Her face, usually stern, now appeared contorted with worry. Rushing towards Becky, Evelyn demanded, "Where is she? Is Kelpie here?" Becky, trying to keep calm, responded, "She's inside, safe. She had something to eat and then fell asleep." But Evelyn's anxiety quickly shifted to suspicion as she pointed an accusing finger at Becky. "What did you do to my granddaughter? Why was she with you?" Becky's mouth hung open in surprise. She hadn't anticipated this reaction. Just then, Jason, who had followed Evelyn from the truck, attempted to calm his mother. "Mom, let's get the full story first." Before Becky could muster a response, one of the police officers interjected. "Ma'am, Becky here found Kelsey lost in the forest and took care of her. She is the reason she's safe now." Becky added, "Actually, it was Chance who led me to her." "Chance?" Evelyn's brows furrowed in confusion. At the mention of his name, the golden dog trotted up, wagging his tail happily and nuzzling Evelyn's hand. The realization dawned on Evelyn that the very dog she had been annoyed with had played a key role in her granddaughter's rescue. "I'm sorry for snapping at you earlier," Evelyn whispered, her voice choking with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of Kelsey." "It's all right, Mrs. Thompson," Becky said, trying to lighten the mood. "All's well that ends well." Together, they entered the house. As they approached the couch where Kelsey was resting, the little girl's eyes slowly opened. Seeing her family, her face lit up and she was soon wrapped in her father's loving embrace. Between sobs, she whispered, "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I will never wander off again." As he tenderly brushed her hair behind her ear, he said, "I should be the one apologizing. Let's go see the swans and listen to the songs of the cuckoo." Kelsey looked up. "Can we take Chance and Becky along?" Jason's eyes met Becky's, making her blush. "Of course. If they'd like to come, they're more than welcome." Jason had lived apart from his mother, Evelyn, for some time. Maggie mentioned he once loved a woman who already had a baby when they met. However, by the time the child was 2, she had left, leaving Jason to bring up Kelsey on his own. Though reserved, Jason was a talented software engineer specializing in video games. His job gave him the freedom to work from anywhere, so he often traveled. A week later, as promised, they all headed to the lake. Kelsey and Chance joyfully led the way, racing each other. Through Kelsey's eyes, Jason was a hero, raising a child that wasn't biologically his. When Becky mentioned hearing about his past, he earnestly said, "I love her deeply. It doesn't matter to me whose daughter she is." As they strolled towards the lake, Becky, not very tech-savvy, listened intently to Jason's stories. But Kelsey interrupted with a playful reprimand. "Dad, Becky doesn't play video games? I already asked her." Jason laughed lightly. "I apologize, Becky. I guess I'm out of practice when it comes to making conversation. It's been some time." Becky's initial apprehension faded, and they enthusiastically discussed topics like the length of a swan's neck, the best time to watch a sunset, and if aliens could feel love. Once they reached Becky's home, where Jason had parked earlier, their goodbyes were prolonged. Kelsey tightly embraced Becky, reluctant to let go, and it was evident Jason was in no hurry to leave. When their car finally pulled away, Becky stepped back inside her house, feeling a newfound warmth in her heart. "You see, this town has everything," Maggie said, smirking. Becky turned, catching sight of Maggie's teasing grin. "Oh, Maggie, stop it. Jason and I are just friends. Thanks to Kelsey. Don't jump to conclusions." Chuckling, Becky expressed her gratitude to Maggie. As she did, a plan started to form in her mind. The following day, she enlisted Maggie's help to prepare a special dinner. "I've invited a couple of guests," she hinted. Maggie, catching the implication, eagerly lent a hand. That evening, Jason and Kelsey were Becky's honored guests. As they settled in, Becky shared her idea with Jason, who responded with an understanding smile. "No, Jason, it's we who should be hosting, not her," said Evelyn, Jason's mother, standing at the door with Kelsey. "Mom, it's more than just dinner," Jason gently explained, nudging his mother to join them as Becky chatted with Maggie in the kitchen. They had arranged the dining setup in the living room. As Evelyn and Kelsey entered, Jason guided them to their seats. Jason then joined Becky and Maggie in the kitchen. On seeing him, Maggie turned and smiled. "I had a feeling you'd be behind this," she teased. Maggie grabbed a bowl of salad, heading back to the dining area. Spotting Evelyn, she hesitated for a moment, placing the salad on the table. Just then, Jason and Becky entered, their faces bright with smiles. "Please, Maggie, join us." Becky gestured towards an empty seat. With a hint of surprise, Maggie sat down, a small smile forming. The realization hit her. She wasn't just a help tonight, she was a cherished guest. She exchanged appreciative glances with Becky. Facing both Evelyn and Maggie, Jason began. "Mom, Aunt Maggie," pausing for emphasis, "I believe it's time we put the past behind us." Evelyn's eyes were misty with tears, but her pride remained intact. Sensing the need to bridge the gap, Becky approached her. Gently taking Evelyn's hand, she pulled her into a warm embrace. Seeing this, Jason signaled to Maggie. With hesitant steps, Maggie approached, and after a long 15 years, the two sisters finally reunited in a heartfelt hug. Jason and Becky began spending more time together, with their bond growing stronger every day. Maggie and Evelyn, on the other hand, took their time to heal the rift between them. Their afternoons were spent reminiscing about old times and sharing stories. Evelyn, with a chuckle, admitted that despite their years of silence, she had always kept tabs on Maggie's family through mutual friends and discreet observations. It was a testament to the deep bond they shared, a bond that time and misunderstandings couldn't completely sever. One day, while Maggie and Evelyn were catching up in Maggie's living room, Evelyn said, "You know, even when we weren't talking, I always felt connected to you, Mags. I knew about your new job, the birth of your granddaughter, and even the little lemon tree you planted last summer." Maggie laughed, both amazed and amused by her sister's stealthy ways. Becky, who had felt a void in her life after the loss of her parents, found solace in this warm, interconnected web of relationships. One clear afternoon, as she sat on her porch sipping tea, Becky dialed her Aunt Leslie's number. The moment she picked up, Becky said, "Aunt Leslie, I can't thank you enough for urging me to move here. This town, these people, they've made me complete and at peace." Leslie's voice, filled with warmth, replied, "I had a feeling you'd find your place there, my dear. Life has a funny way of guiding us exactly where we need to be." With time, not only did Becky's bond with Jason strengthen, but she also formed an unbreakable connection with little Kelsey. They formed a picture-perfect trio that was completed by the ever-loyal Chance. A year later, in the heart of spring, Becky and Jason made the decision to solidify their bond. They held a simple, intimate wedding at a local park, surrounded by close friends, family, and blossoming flowers. Kelsey played a special role as a flower girl, sprinkling petals with a joyous grin. 9 months after the wedding, their family grew a little bigger. Kelsey became the proud big sister to a baby boy, whom they named Alan. She took her role seriously, always eager to help, whether it was fetching diapers or softly singing lullabies to him. Becky often found Kelsey whispering secrets and stories into baby Alan's ears, promising him endless adventures and a lifetime of sibling camaraderie. Evelyn, delighted in her role as a doting grandmother, spoiling both children with love, wisdom, and occasional treats. The house was often filled with the sounds of laughter, stories from the past, and dreams